Clear? All right, so thank you. Thank you for that. Just to say this, I'm a Lagos boy, true and true. And like we can testify, to that. We started our careers literally on the same day. You're not really going to be able to create valuable information in the way in which marketing requires data to use, to make good decisions. Then, of course, there's the other issue, which is you need it to be a stream. It has to be a stream which constantly flows. So you can dam the data, create lakes with the data, and then go about using it to do the things that you want. So we've got quite a lot of challenges, that we would need to set up. However, I'd like to also, just very quickly before going on, also want to just salute the courage of the guys at Innovate, the GDM group. I think what is going on here today is such a very important aspect of what our community of practice needs. I've worked for so many agencies, or worked with a lot of colleagues here to build quite a few agencies, and I kind of understand the challenge that we're faced with. The truth of the matter is that the agency model has to change, and it cannot change from within. Let's take one case. Look at the route to market. The technology guys have come and completely disrupted that space. Traditionally, former CEOs or former sales directors or marketing directors and agencies should be the ones who should have actually innovated that space. So there's a lot of work that we need to do. And so I want to just speak to the innovators, really, in terms of, can I have my slides, please? In terms of what, is that working? Okay. Right. So in terms of my objective, I've got 20 minutes, I'm told. I might take a little bit more. But really, my objective is to speak to those of you who ultimately think they have the potential to create innovation. And the reason is because I've kind of worked in this area for some time. And now, after about some years back, in 2015, I decided, 2017, to go and take a break from practice and think and hopefully write a book or two. And now I've got this very, very enjoyable job of working with young people from all over the world who come in the entrepreneurship and innovation space, looking to think through their ideas for about a year. And we help them with respect to the marketing side of it. And so this is part of what this is going to be, to give you some very, hopefully, home truths about what it means and what it takes to be able to truly create innovative solutions for a market context such as ours. But before we do that, let me try and see how much of digital natives you are. Here, you've got something. What do you guys call it? What do you call it? What do you call it? Okay, great. So you call it what? A dustbin. What do you call it? A waste bin. What else? You call it a trash can. All right, good. The British will call it a rubbish bin. The Americans will call it a garbage can. I don't know, we call it all sorts of things, but that's not what's important. The key question here is, what do you think you'll find inside this? A, problems. B, solutions. C, opportunities. D, people. That's a bit scary. E, all of the above, or D, none of them at all. Now, what I'd like you to do is, if you've got some data and you're happy to invest in it, I'd like you to go on to www.menti.com and just type in the code that you see there. I'll read the code out. So when you get into www.menti.com, please type in 3533986, and let's hope the technology doesn't fail me. Okay? Can anyone just let me know? So those of you, have you gotten in? All right, then just answer the question. What do you think you will find there? Problems? Solutions? That's B. C, opportunities. D, people. E, all of the above. Or F, none of the above. Now we will move to the next slide, and I'll ask the tech guys there to please support by going to the... could you please do that? Are you able to do that? Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Excellent. No, it didn't come through. Do you want to try it again? It does require some nifty fingers. Right. Could you then also press on present? Hopefully we should be able to then. If you press on present, are you able to do that? Are you able to do that? Okay. If not, what I'll suggest you do is fiddle with it, and we'll come back to it at the end of. Or could you click on results and let's see whether it works? No, not there. Click on that one and see if it works. Just and let's see what happens. Hopefully that might work as well. It should take you to the results page. Do you have any luck? No. We have 56 people who have actually voted, so we know that. Okay. No, you've not. Yeah, you need to be able to manipulate it properly from there. But we know 56 people have voted. What I would do is if you can. Okay, let's see that. Yeah. That might work. And then click on present. That's it. The blue something at the very end, not there at the end. Oh yes, thank you. Hopefully that should work. Present. Hopefully you should get the scores. No? Okay, so what we'll do is let me allow you to try and carry on. You just see if you can get that, and then you can screen dump it or something, and we'll come back to it. And if we could go back to my presentation. But it's an interesting question which ultimately intended to help us understand part of the challenges that you will face if you truly want to innovate in verticals. Okay, could we go on to the next to my slides, please? We'll come back to the results when you're able to get it. Okay. All right. So, but first, let me start by telling the story. In 2017, I decided, as I said, to take time off to go and start the process of trying to understand how to be a better researcher. Now, that gentleman over there who has his neck bent, his name is Michael Herrick, and I met him in 2017 because we became colleagues. And Michael, at the time, was an associate professor, and his passion was to research areas of marketing and digitization. And ultimately, given the background that I had and the fact that I had some years back tried to start a company in data and literally failed to win a contract in an entire year, we really got talking and started basically a relationship. And that relationship led us to a point where, given again our shared and common interest, where we came to a point where we had a question, a research question we really wanted to tackle. And that is, how do marketing-led technology innovations emerge and how do they grow in chaotic market domains? And I've underlined chaotic market domains. I'll repeat the question. This basically formed the strategic question that Michael and I, for the next couple of, basically since 2017, have been trying to answer. How do marketing-led innovations, marketing-led technology innovations emerge, and how do they grow, and particularly grow fast in chaotic market domains? Now, you might ask me, what do I mean when I use the phrase chaotic market domain? Let's quickly look at some of the literature with respect to marketing-led innovation and what it means. So what exactly is a marketing-led innovation? This is innovation that can be defined as the effective application of processes and products new to the world, okay, and that are designed to be of benefit to that organization itself, which is the venturing company, and indeed all its stakeholders. That's what we mean when we use the phrase marketing-led innovation. Now, what types of marketing innovation domains are there? We have 4. And the easiest is the most obvious. You can choose to innovate in an obvious market. Now, what's an obvious market? An obvious market is where all the knowns are known. Okay? And typically, where all the knowns are known, you really don't need very radical innovation. All you need is incremental innovation. All right? So you're not going to be as dramatic as Elon Musk and the rest of them, but you will make impact of some kind. Now, the next is that you might have a complicated market where the knowns are not known. All right? In that case, what your approach would be is to go with radical innovation. And then you've got typical complex markets where you find quite a lot of, particularly in Europe and in the West, a lot of markets are complex. The known unknowns, there are known unknowns, and there are unknown knowns. And so typically, radical innovation becomes extremely useful. But then you've got this very peculiar being of a domain which is referred to as the chaotic market. In the chaotic market, nobody knows. And the truth of the matter is this. Part of the conversations that the gentleman from Nestle was speaking about is because we are living in a chaotic market. Nobody knows where the data is. Nobody understands where the information is. We have snippets, but we don't have flows, nor streams. We have not institutionalized our data, and therefore it's extremely difficult. Quite honestly, this is a research market. This is a market research market. It's not yet truly a database marketing environment. But it's fast getting there, because whether we like it or not, that is happening. And that's the reason why the biggest game in the game or in today is digitization, because that's what sets you up to then go into becoming, hopefully, some form of a complicated or a complex market. So that basically is part of what we looked at. And then, of course, the next issue was, so within this whole notion of innovation, and I think David spoke to this, there are a whole range of types of innovation. The most dramatic and obviously the most popular is disruptive innovation, which ultimately is about changing the state of the world and creating a new world. That's fundamentally what disruption is. But you've also got other types of ways in which you can innovate. You can innovate applications, you could do product innovation or product-led innovation, and then you've got the very famous one, which is business model innovation, which is you take the way in which the industry ultimately operated and completely change it on its head. And that's what you have with the famous Uber, the Uberization of the world, as they call it, the Airbnbs, very famous. But interestingly, John Cunningham, who might be a gentleman you know, yes, who is the CTO of the Unlimited Group. Before coming, I asked John a question, because did a summer job with him, spending time to understand because they're building a new CRM system, or a new approach or philosophy to CRM, and that's a passion area of mine. And I asked him, which company today do you truly admire, John? And he said to me, Amazon. And the reason is that a lot of people think Amazon is just simply the website or the shopping site. It's not. Amazon is a really, really radical, disruptive innovator, and has disrupted so many spaces. And what it does is it invests in its data engine. The Amazon data engine, what's happening with AWS, and what AWS is now being primed to be able to do for you, actually will be giving small players ability to use AI at massive scale. Massive, they are democratizing technology which big players ultimately thought they had because they had the money to do. So there's a lot that's happening and is about to kick off. But anyway, so there are lots of places in which we can ultimately innovate. So by this time, Mike and I felt very, very comfortable that we had not just a strategic research question that we could then tackle, but that there was something we could ultimately do. And we started to write a paper. And we were so gung-ho about it. And in the summer of 2019, I believe it was, we went off to Naples, Italy. Very nice wine in that place. Very nice wine. And we're really ready to show the world this fantastic, work that we had done. It was poorly received. It was poorly received. Yeah, because we thought we were going to get ourselves a 4-star paper. Sadly, we did not. What we got was pot shots because we were right there in the thick. If you understand the way, and this I didn't know some years ago, but if you understand the way the academic system works, there are tribes. And we went to the tribes of the guys who are experts in service. Okay, and we came with this concept, which, for those of you who might be familiar with the concept of service dominant logic, yeah? Okay. And how co-creation, by the way, is from the service dominant logic. But the point is, we went there and we had something to say, and it was poorly received. But that was perhaps one of the best things that happened to us, because it also taught me an important lesson. The work of trying to truly understand phenomena requires time. Okay? And so we went back, tails between our legs, and we got working again. And gradually, we got to a point where we then realized that we could actually tell an important story to the world. Because that's really what you're trying to do when you go to these conferences. You're trying to tell an important story that captures the imagination of everyone. And so we returned to first base, which is chaotic markets, right? Now, a couple of years ago, in 2012, do you guys know this company? Paga? You all know Paga? All right. In 2012, Tayo Yosu and Jay, who were the co-founders of the company, along with Yemila Lude, who was working at the time in a VC fund, invited me to join the board of Paga. And between 2012 and 2015, I sat on the board of Paga as a non-executive director. But it was a fascinating experience because I literally had the second driver's seat, not the driver's seat, the passenger seat of watching a fintech innovator go through the pain of doing what? Of trying to emerge and grow in under chaotic market conditions. Now, the fascinating story, and on its way to becoming a unicorn, right? On its way to becoming a unicorn in the next one year. It's set up all the things that it needs to do to be able to actually win capitalization at that rate. Now, the thing about Paga is, of course, this is a story in terms of growth. The top there shows you the number of partners, sales agents, right? As we have them, those women who you go to the POS card for. They started this when no one was there, right? They literally started this when no one was there. And they grew from literally having not a single agent by 2011. I joined the board in 2012. And by 2020, they had about 12,000 agents. All right? That's one side of the story. The second side of the story is growth in terms of users. They had literally no one in 2011. But as at the end of 2020, Paga had 20 million users. And I think by last year, they had actually done what? They had, transferred at least ₦1 trillion on behalf of Nigerians. Okay? You cannot get more successful than this as a fintech. But the question is, so these are simple numbers, which are all right, but the more interesting story is what was going on. What was going on? Between 2011 and 2020, there were a range of things happening across different domains of performance. Institutionally, we lived in a chaotic market, right? From a social context, they were building a phenomenal institution called the sales agent network. From the standpoint of service or feature sets, if you speak that language, they pivoted their feature sets and gradually kept changing what Paga could do for you. Does that make sense? Ultimately, the Paga brand kept reinventing itself, right? In terms of what its value proposition was. Now, underpinning all of that, obviously, was technology. Because this is a fintech, right? Or so we say, right? It's a fintech, right? Okay. So two key things. The physical structure, which ultimately every innovator will require. And then the physical symbols, which is what you will take AI. I don't care about AI, but Alexa means something to me. In other words, you're taking the voice element of AI, which is, by the way, the fastest growing element of it, and you've created a consumer proposition with it. You've created a physical symbol with it, Alexa, right? And what it can do. And someone spoke to what the Japanese are doing with AI technology to keep very middle-aged men happy in Japan, because Japan has a serious problem, social problem, for those of us who understand that. Now, this is what was going on. The emergence and growth of the fintech over time, in this case, Paga, was through the orchestrated play of constitutive rules of collective intentions. Now, that's the way academics speak. I didn't used to speak like this. All right, but you've got it. Legitimacy means you can use the language, right? Exactly. So I'll say that again so that I really sound smart. The orchestrated play of constitutive rules of collective intentions, of actors all moving towards a service purpose. Mr. Alake asked you about the intent. What's the service purpose? Now, think and reflect on this. Because, in many ways, if we were to conceptualize what it means to emerge, or for a fintech innovator to emerge under chaotic conditions, such as you will find in this beautiful land called Nigeria, then you need to understand that you have an interplay of many forces that your technology... Actually, do you want me to just bust the balloon? It's not about your technology. Sorry? It's not about your technology, it's not about your code. No, it's about the way you can orchestrate all of that to make sense in the following manner. One, that your physical structure, your technology innovation speaks to the institutional realities of what it means to be in an environment like this. And most importantly, the social structures support it. If any one of those doesn't work, you will end up like me knocking on doors for a year and not selling one single one. Database marketing solution. Okay? Now, but then in doing this, understand this, and this is the key point, that as service actors, you are the orchestrator. If you're the company or you're the venturing team, you will be the orchestrator of this ecosystem you're trying to build. Your job is going to be making sure that you're not just covered with your hoodie. I'm happy to use, okay, I'm back. Okay, great. So understand this, that you are not going to be, don't get lost in the code, as we will see. The code is important. There's no doubt about that. Building whatever it is you want to build as an engine is absolutely important. But when you move into this environment, you are an innovator who is trying to bring about a solution that must be embedded in a society. Does this make sense? All right? It has to be embedded in the society. It has to work with everyone else. And one of the most important ways it will have to do that is your job is to bring about this whole notion of what are the constitutive rules. How are we going to constitute this solution? And that means changing it and pivoting it over time. Now, let's therefore say this. By the way, I choose to call it what the Americans call it, which is the garbage can. The British will call it the rubbish bin, but I think the garbage can really it has emphasis. This is where 9 out of 10 marketing-led innovations will end up. Do you agree? Yep, exactly. This is where 9 out of 10 will end up. So if I suspect you are innovators, I'm hoping you are innovators. If I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, sorry, you're out. You will be about the only one. That's the reality of what happens, because it's hard. And there's so many reasons why innovations will fail. This is a bit of a slight, I don't know what happened there, but. And these are the 10 most common causes. for failure. The first is the lack of problem identification. Is it your problem, or is it the true problem that the consumer has, or the audience has, or whoever it is? Is it your problem? The second is the lack of the ability to ideate and create good ideas. All right? Yep. The third is that there is poor execution of the idea in itself. And God knows execution is exactly what, that's the job, right? There is, in strategy, what is it? It's in strategy, your executed strategy was your strategy, right? So there is that. Then there is lack of funding, which is what every innovator wants to throw as the excuse. I didn't have anybody to give me money. No. Or support. The lack of a clear roadmap or a plan. Implementation challenges. Then there is also this notion of the cultural barrier, which is why the smartest guys in Silicon Valley wait for you to do the job, and then they can give you Series B, C, and D. Because they know that they might not be able to embed the solution properly culturally. All right? Do you want me to give you a classical example? Paystack. Paystack would not have succeeded if, who are the guys who bought into Paystack? Exactly. Do you think Stripe would have come into this environment and worked successfully? There's a cultural challenge. So they came into the Y Combinator, they did all they had to do, they were taught how to ultimately go there and dominate the world, which is what they do when you go to Harvard, they tell you that. Right? And when they got the job done, and it was time for the next, transfer financing, what happens then? So a lot of you need to think very deeply when you're planning out your ventures. Who am I targeting for my first, my second, my third? It's not just about an idea yet. And I hope I'm speaking to innovators, because that's really why I came. I want to speak to innovators, right? Think about that. And then you're going to have a lot of people who tell you you can never do it. Forget about that one. We understand that. And go on, and so on and so forth. And then there is this issue of what's referred to as the customer false positives. What's a customer false positive? When you say, that's the person I'm going after. That's the person this solution is meant for. And it turns out that that's not actually the person who needs the solution. So you built an entire strategy, all right, on the wrong customer. And the moment you've done that, as anyone in marketing will tell you, you don't have a product, you don't have a solution. Okay, so think about all those 10. Does it not come back to this? The lack of the orchestrated play of constitutive rules for collective intentions. Would you agree? If you reflect on all those 10, it really comes to this point. So, the question therefore is this. Can the garbage, rubbish, thrash, solve problems? You know what? I then remembered during my MBA days that there was this thing called the garbage can theory. For those of you who might be familiar with it. It was brought to us by some very interesting professors way back in 1972. And basically what it is that they said that the garbage can is a metaphor for how problem solving actually happens in real life. All right? It suggests that a decision domain, in this case, metaphored by the garbage can, operates as a form of organized anarchy and is made up of problems, solutions, opportunities, and indeed active stakeholders. Okay? And all of them are acting randomly, as well as independent of each other. So what does that mean? What does that mean? So I know that the tech failed us. Very quickly, who here said problems? Just raise, show of hands. Who here said solutions? Okay. Who here said opportunities? Interesting. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. Let's be frank. The recycling industry fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, was founded in Africa. All right? Active stakeholders, people. Who said people? Who said none of the above? And who said all of the above? Very smart people. Excellent, excellent. Because indeed it is. Yes, the garbage can solve problems if you learn how to play with rubbish or trash or waste. And so what I did is I took that paper and developed a card sort game, which I use with our innovators in our MSc entrepreneurship class. And basically what we do is we go through several rounds of problems, and you pick the card. And whatever it is you get, you do what with? So, for instance, if you pick a problem, frame a problem statement. I don't care what the problem statement is. You just frame one. If you pick solution, you know what? Suggest a solution that is searching for a problem. Okay? Or study a participant within a stakeholder group that you might have. And just talk to us about who these people are. And then finally, the easy one, which is where we normally would like to focus, if you're what's referred to as a Carnegie entrepreneur, is you're identifying opportunities. And we're very good at that in this country. Right? Opportunity. Identifying opportunity that can be exploited very quickly. But then the point here is this. What have we done? We've taken the theory, basically, it was developed in 1972. And all I did was applied gamification to it. And suddenly, you need to see when these guys are working with this in class. And in our incubator place there. And what this suddenly showed me is that playbooks are important. Play is important in the way and the manner in which you're going to work and build out successful opportunities. So let's understand what are playbooks. I really got fascinated by the concept of playbooks. Playbooks are dynamic mental models set against a competitive reference that helps all stakeholders and all players on the same team or in the same ecosystem to ultimately understand how we're going to win. So you're not going to win because of the code. Does this make sense? You're going to win because of your playbook. Because you have a good playbook. Does this make sense? Yep. And this is why, as you go in over the next 6 weeks, the real fun is not just in developing the solution, but it's also thinking deeply about what the playbook should be. Now, what are playbooks? We are absolutely mad about football in this country, right? So we know how the coach sets the game, right? Right? So playbooks actually are used so much in sports, right? So you will be here, the guy will be there, the attack is coming from there, you will pass the ball to that guy, right? And if you don't execute the play that the coach called for, you see him screaming, right? At the side of the pitch. So playbooks are used to win. All right? It's a natural technique or whatever you want to call it. It is not static, which is what business models are. This is the point. It is dynamic because it keeps moving. Right? So if I gave you a simple Potter's 5-force model, it's static. All right? Or which you might need to use to understand whether you should get into that industry at all in the first place. But a playbook is when you take all of that and you're ultimately building out a sequence and a series of different ways of doing it. So here are playbook principles. First and foremost, it builds on strategy. How are we going to win? What are the strategic ambitions? So it's not again about the code. It's about the strategic ambition that is going to drive the code. Agree? Where are we going? But it's also about implementation. A good playbook will have implementation. How are we going to execute? And this is where you put in place wargaming. Wargaming, dynamic capability mapping, action planning. Do you understand what I mean by wargaming? Yeah? Okay. Which is when the military general is going to execute a war, all the generals step into a room, lock the door, right? And spend days and months on end. Scenario by scenario. Move by... The best example of wargaming is chess. Right? Great masters in chess have actually played 32 steps ahead. That's what a grandmaster does. Right? That's wargaming. If I play that, I know it's going to do... Actually, our grandfathers used to do it with Ayo and draft. Right? Under the tree. That's strategy. That's wargaming. So you've got to do that for your innovation. How is this going to play out and ultimately get into that? And finally, very importantly, validation. the most important thing, and I heard that conversation happen here today, and I thought that was extremely useful. It doesn't matter if ultimately, how do we know we're winning? How do we know we are what? Winning. So you need to know how you're doing this. And proper playbook principles operate on the basis of time as well as what? The value horizon. Okay? Now, a few minutes. So very quickly, because I'm running out of time. Here, one of the most important companies in the world has some amazing playbook practices. Perhaps the most important for me is this notion of the empty chair. It is a cultural relic and a ritual that Jeff Bezos has made famous. The red chair, empty chair. Every time the senior management of Amazon gather for any senior meeting, there's a red chair left empty. Do you know what that chair represents? The customer who they serve. It's the basis of this notion of customer obsession. And there's so many other I'm not going to go into. Another one is the 6-page Word document, rather than a PowerPoint presentation. But to speed things up, just to take it to a point, this is where I think it's important that you understand. If you are setting up your game as a tech startup, you must understand the nature of playbooks for that specific focused area that startups need to do. You have 3 stages you need to cross. You have to have a problem solution fit, which I suspect you've passed because that's why you were pre-selected. But now your job is to come to product market fit. And the set of playbooks you're going to have to put in place ultimately must be because you must be able to validate that those constitutive rules towards a service purpose ultimately means that you have a customer validation. Right? And we must remember, it doesn't matter about your idea being brilliant if it doesn't come to product market fit. Does that make sense? Sorry, does that make sense? All right. And ultimately, so that's ultimately what it is. So I'm going to wrap up now in 2 minutes. Okay. One is to understand this. 3 things you need to worry about. 1, it has to be purposeful, your playbooks. It has to focus on efficiency and transformation. And that's why we then tap into so many worlds of deep brand discovery, agile thinking, innovation management. And I suspect that the mentoring process should take you through this. The other thing, now the most famous, of course, of all these playbooks will be the business model canvas, Alex Osterwilder's. I think most of us might be familiar with it, right? Do we? Okay. The key thing with the model is not to make it static, but to make it dynamic. Right? That's the key thing about the business model. How do you make it dynamic? And when you're doing this, 2 things you must worry about, you must be careful about. First, false personas and inauthentic user stories. I'll leave you to think about that. In other words, 1, who exactly is the customer? And are they wearing a toga? And have you actually been told the truth about what exactly their need is? Right? Okay, so we'll leave it at that. This is my last slide. There are 4 areas that ultimately you can use to win. The first is to set the right vision. The second is to build the right equity. The third is, as I said, the persona, and then what's the story you're ultimately going to tell. Across those 4 performance areas, you have 12 playbooks, okay, that you can ultimately then use to give your innovation idea a fighting chance. It's not going to guarantee success, but hopefully it will do what? It will give you a better fighting chance. And ultimately, I think that's really what this is about in terms of the core message I want, hoping to ultimately send to you. And so, by the way, just to give you, we finally got accepted for Star Paper. Michael left and has become a professor of digitization and marketing at University of Graz in Austria. I get to be able to go and spend my summer teaching a class in his university, and we'll see what happens. And of course, we took our wives out
Thank you very much. Another warm round of applause for Dr. Rotimi Olaniyan. I mean, I definitely felt like I was back in class, and I know a lot of us were taking notes. He went into the cocoa of it, yes.